There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean Breeze Books. Welcome back to my channel. I'm trying to do another Friday Reads in the basement. I haven't replaced the awful lighting, but I think it's going to be better. I was trying to fix it by using those studio light things that I have, and it just made everything worse. So I'm sitting in a different corner of the library, and with just the overhead lights, and we'll see how it goes. But once I get track lighting down here, all will be well in my library, if not my world. I have a couple of pieces of bookish news. I don't have any personal news. My life is on such an even keel that you'll probably never hear me talk about anything personal for 1 month on end. All two of you that care about my personal life. So, in my bookish life, here's the show and tell, part 2 of my story about the book that got away from me. That was a special collector's item at the book sale. I talked about it last Friday. I won't repeat all that. You can go back if you haven't seen it. But here I picked it up, and actually the dust jacket is in much better condition than I remembered. So here it is. Matt Cohen, first edition of Matt Cohen's wonderful novel, The Sweet Second Summer of Kitty Malone, which was 1979 or something. Yes, 1979. And yeah, the dust jacket on the front is pretty good. There's a little bit of a chip right there. And in the back. But other than that, it's in pretty good shape. So here's the inscription. And it says, "To Don Heron, with best wishes from an addicted listener, Matt Cohen." So I guess Don Heron had a radio show. He did so many things. He must have been on the radio. I know that part of his shtick with this character that he created for the American TV country music variety show, Charlie Farquharson, showed up in many other types of media. So that must be what Matt Cohen was referring to. And I don't know if the notes on the inside flap are from Don Heron or not, but there's a whole list of page numbers and whatnot, a little bit of underlining throughout the book, all of which I'm assuming was Don Heron himself. So this is just a possession I will treasure. Never mind that, as I said last week, I read the novel as an ebook maybe 5 years ago and loved it. And a couple American viewers commented last week that Hee Haw was an American show, and they were surprised that there was a Canadian version of it. I had to Google that, and no, there was no Canadian. There was only one Hee Haw show. And Don Heron, the Canadian guy, whose book I have in my hot little hands, he was on that American show, so that cleared that up. But some of you remembered the show quite fondly, so that was wonderful. The other thing is, I had a very literary birthday party at my house on Sunday. David Carpenter, who I put up a video of one of our chats just last week, he turned 84 this week, and so Sunday I had him and his wife, and Sharon Batella, and Mum over for a little party. Mum brought her world famous carrot cake, and we all had such a good time. I don't expect many or any of you to remember this, but in the interview I did with him and Sharon Batalla about a year ago, Dave talked about his first inspiration to be a writer was actually from a comic book that was popular in the 50s, Little Lulu. So I'd never heard of Little Lulu. Have any of you? If so, you must be much older than me. And he just said he was obsessed with the stories in those comic books. So I made a note, and this is something Mum said, "Sean, you're so good at getting gifts." I don't know if I'm always good at getting gifts, but for people that are a little bit like me, I'm pretty good at getting gifts. I don't think Kenji would agree that I'm good at giving gifts. We've given up on getting gifts for each other. We just take each other shopping around Christmas time. But I made a little note that I was going to track down a Little Lulu comic book for him, which I found on eBay, and he was just delighted. So that was wonderful. And that is my personal bookish literary update. And here is this week's absolutely incredible mystery guest. This week's mystery guest is the Canadian writer Lucy Black, joining us from Port Perry, Ontario, to talk about her new novel, which just published 2 weeks ago. We are recording this conversation in advance, but when you see it, it will have been out for 2 weeks. And it sounds absolutely right up my street. It is called A Quilting of Stars and published by Now or Never Publishing. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am really excited to hear more about this novel, so why don't you get us started? Give us an introductory little pitch for it.
This is a historical fiction. It's placed in Ontario farm country in the early 1900s. And it's the story of a young man named Larkin. And Larkin has grown up on a farm. And when he was a young boy, a neighboring farm had a huge fire, and the livestock burned, and the house and the barn were burned. And after the fire was over, two dead bodies were discovered. And my main character, Larkin, knows how those two men died in the fire. And it turns out it wasn't the fire that killed them, they were stabbed to death, and the fire was set to cover their murder. And Larkin knows these secrets, and these secrets haunt him and really overshadow his life as he moves from boyhood to manhood. And as the novel unfolds, we learn more about the murder, we learn more about the community, and it's all about Ontario farming and the social mores of the period, if you will.
And the opening chapter is dated 1909.
Yeah.
He is looking back, he is remembering what happened to him how many years before at that point?
Approximately 50 years. The whole novel takes place during the course of one very long night. We start essentially with Larkin as an old man remembering, and the whole novel is about him remembering his life on the farm, remembering the murders, remembering the fire, remembering his friends, and
So,
everything that took place in the community.
so the fire and the murders would have been in the kind of like the around the mid 19th century ish.
Yes,
Oh, I interpreted a phrase on the back cover.
yes,
That phrase is a story of forbidden love.
yes.
I don't know what that means. I have my own assumption about what it means, but do you want to tell us or not what that means?
Larkin has a boyhood friend named Paul, and it's Paul's father and one of Paul's brothers that die in the fire or that are found after the fire. And Paul and Larkin are very close friends. And as young children do, when they are young boys, they're exploring their sexuality.
Right.
And they're very close and they really love each other. And they remain close for all of their lives. Larkin isn't sure if he's gay or not. Paul isn't sure if he's gay or not. We're never sure. We do know that these boys love each other. And we do know that they're very afraid for anyone to find out how deeply they care for each other. They're so afraid of scorn from the community. They're afraid of being called sodomists. They're afraid of the church's condemnation, and it's very crippling. So it's a forbidden love, even though it's not really entirely defined for either of these young men.
Which was often the case. Uh,
Yes.
So, yes, that is definitely what I thought was going to be happening in the book. So, where did this story come from? How did it come to you, Lucy?
Funnily enough, it started in an antique shop, Sean. And if I don't know if I can move my camera so you can see, but behind me on the wall up high is a poster called The Splendid Horse, Young Netherby. And it's an advertisement from the 1860s in a local newspaper advertising this beautiful horse that's put out to stud by a farmer for $4 a leap. And I was in an antique store and I fell in love with this poster apropos of I don't know what. And it was hugely expensive. And I went back about 3 times and finally bought it. And the poster spoke to me. I began to wonder about the kind of man, the kind of farmer in 1868 that would take out a full page ad in the newspaper advertising his horse for $4 a leap. And he
And
lists
leap
all
is
the
a word. It means basically a session of some love.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, $4 a leap. And
A
he
leap.
lists,
Love that.
the different stables where he's going to take the horse on the different dates. And I began to wonder about a farmer who would do that, because there were tobacco farmers in the area and there were potato farmers in the area. But I didn't know about farmers in the 1860s in this part of Ontario that bred stallions. So I just started doing a lot of reading about Ontario farming in the period and started thinking about the kind of farmer that would own a horse like this. And Larkin walked into my head.
That's great. Now, you're in Port Perry. Is that the specific location of the of this story?
No, it's I've centered it in a fictional place called Cemetery Hill. And in my head, it's in the sort of Stayner, Collingwood, Glen Huron area, Clearview Township. Collingwood itself features in the novel, and I do name Collingwood and talk about the shipyards there, and also a particular street in Collingwood where ladies of the night practice their profession. And Larkin pays him a visit at one point. He wants to make sure that his parts are still working. And so I do talk about Collingwood specifically by name.
The title is A Quilting of Scars, which is a very beguiling title. Tell us about the title.
Thank you. It's a line from the novel. One of the characters in the novel has been abused, and his shirt blows up when he's in the schoolyard, and there's a quilting of scars on his back where he has been beaten. And so that's where that line comes from. But quilts themselves turned up in the book several times. And to me, they became almost a metaphor for putting all the pieces of Larkin's life together.
You have talked a little bit about the fact that the unnameable type of relationship that these two boys had carried on in some way into adulthood. At
Yes.
the point that Larkin is remembering in 1909, is Paul still around or has he passed or
Paul has left the province.
he's left the province? Okay, so they're not together or meeting on a
No,
regular basis.
Larkin has lived a very solitary life. He is very alone. He does have friends in the community, but his horses are his closest companions.
Is this your debut novel?
No, this is my sixth book. I've been very fortunate to have had a number of books published
I
by
knew you had
small.
other books published. I thought it looked to me like they might be short story collections. That's why I asked if it was your debut novel.
No. So in 2017, Inanna Publications, a feminist press out of York University, published the Marzipan Fruit Basket. And it was a collection of short stories, as you rightly thought, all about women, stories of dislocation that women go through. And in the same year, I had my first historical novel published called Eleanor Curtin. And it was a turn of the century novel, also set in Ontario farm country. And then there was a book called Stella's Carpet. And Stella's Carpet was all about intergenerational trauma. My parents were in Europe during the Second World War. And so Stella's Carpet is a fictionalized story of many of the things that my father experienced during the war and how those stories have impacted subsequent generations. And then after that, I published a book called The Brickworks. And The Brickworks is also historical fiction. And it was about progressivist ideology here in Ontario. And last year, I published another short story collection called Class Lessons. I was a high school principal for a number of years, and Class Lessons is about the importance of advocacy for children who fall between the cracks. And so there's stories of young people that were very vulnerable and the kinds of things that I hope that we can do a better job of. So it's really a book about advocacy for young people. And then there's this book, Quilting of Scars.
So it sounds to me like your imagination is very much a historical one.
I love historical fiction, and I find it a very useful vehicle. Some of the issues that I talk about in A Quilting of Scars, I think, are issues that continue to resonate. The thing that I would hope that people would take away from A Quilting of Scars is the importance of unconditional love and acceptance. I think that's a contemporary concern.
Sounds absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to read it, Lucy. What
Thank
are you
you.
working on now?
I don't want to talk about my current writing
That's fine.
project. I do have another book that's been scheduled, that's in the pipes, if you will. I can talk about that one. It's called The Mural, and it's about love and how young girls are given these mediated messages of what love and marriage is really all about. And there's the whole Disney princess wedding of your dreams kind of thing. Very little emphasis in society placed on how to build long term loving relationships, and that marriage isn't easy. And so the mural is about a young girl who is very idealistic, and she works part time as a model, and she falls in love with the painter that she is modeling for. And it's her first time falling in love, and she thinks that they're going to spend the rest of their lives together. And he disappears. She's heartbroken, ends up marrying somebody on the rebound, a very fine, wonderful man, but then has to work through what it's really like to have a long term relationship that's loving, that's committed, and all sorts of complicating factors like fertility issues, the batty mother in law that's very interfering, and just the kinds of struggles that couples do go through, and coming to terms with that. I'm very excited that it's coming out. I'm hoping it will provoke some useful conversations, particularly with young girls.
And when can we expect that one?
That is coming out in the spring of 2027, again with the same publisher here, A Quilting of Scars. Now or Never Publishing.
You are a very prolific writer.
I've written all my life, and when I received an offer to publish my first short story collection, and then immediately followed up by an offer to publish my novel, my husband encouraged me to take early retirement and said, "You just really have to enjoy this." And so take early retirement and really enjoy it. So I'm very fortunate that I was able to do that, and that I'm able to write full time now. I've written part time in bits and pieces ever since I could hold a pen, but having the luxury not to have to go to work every day and have those responsibilities has just allowed me to work on these stories. And they're just wonderful stories to tell. It's so exciting.
I'm feeling the excitement. This is great. What books would you like to recommend to us?
I don't, can you see this?
Yes, and
It's called In the Bear's House by Bruce Hunter. I just finished this last night. Have you
okay.
read it? Do you know it?
I know it because he was my mystery guest a few weeks ago.
Okay, I think this book belongs in the Canadian canon. This
Sounds
is one of the most beautiful books I have ever read by anyone, never mind by a Canadian writer. I'll be putting out a book review shortly. I do reviews for the Miramichi Reader, but I also do them on my social media. You probably know that. This
Mhm.
book just made me weep. I just loved it. You can't open this book to any random page without finding a line that sings, that's full of music and poetry. It is just the most beautiful book. I just recommend this book so highly. So,
Wonderful. Yeah, I can't
yay to
wait.
Bruce Hunter. And I'm so glad that he was on your show and that you know him.
He
It's
was a
just,
wonderful guest. Yeah.
oh, I bet he was. There's a book that I read just last week, and it's called Shoebox. And it was written by a Nova Scotia writer, Sean Paul Bedell,
Mm,
Shoebox. And
mm.
he was a paramedic. And the book is written as though it's a memoir, but it's not a memoir. It's first person narrative of a man who is a paramedic. and what it's like to go into these situations where you know that you will make the difference between life and death, and how you cope with that when it doesn't work out well, and the impact that takes on your own family. It's a now or never publication. It's a little dark. I've never read anything quite like it. I recommend it very highly.
Wow. Never heard of him or that book.
Oh, write it down. Invite him to your show. It's it's really a worthwhile read. The other book that I thought that I'd do a shout out for is by Adelle Purdham. It's called I Don't Do Disability. Do you know that book, Sean?
No, I don't.
Okay, you need to interview Adele. She's a wonderful speaker. She's very articulate. She has traveled around the world speaking on the subject of being a parent of a Down syndrome child and what that is like to embrace and fiercely love and advocate for a Down syndrome child and how to help them realize their potential. She is a lecturer at Trent University. She's a wonderful writer. And again, it's a book that is unlike any other book that I have read. I'm sure there are other books written by parents of children with disabilities, but I thought that this was very raw, very open, very honest. I think very helpful for parents and educators. So a big shout out to Adele and Bruce and Sean for books that I think just really stand out.
What kind of a reader are you? Are you a one book at a time reader, or are you more polyamorous like me?
I read widely. I typically read a book a day. I read a lot of fiction, but I also love biography and I love political commentary. And I think that's especially important right now. A book called On Freedom by Tim Snyder, absolutely wonderful. And Carol Off's book, where she talks, I can't remember, do you know Carol Off?
I know the book you're talking about. It just came out about a
Yeah,
year ago.
yeah, it's a phenomenal book as well. So I read widely. I read a lot of political commentary, a lot of biography, a lot of history, a lot of fiction. And I really, when I was a young woman in graduate school, really focused on 19th century fiction because that was British fiction, that was my passion. But as an older reader, I think it's really important to uplift Canadian writers. And so I buy a lot of books from Canadian independent presses and read and try to uplift Canadian
That was a
writers.
great Freudian slip. You said up love. That has a nice ring to it.
Yeah, it's both actually.
Right.
But I just think it's so important to celebrate Canadian stories, particularly in my view, Canadian stories being published by small Canadian presses, because the big five just have such a hold on the publishing world right now. And our independent presses do a really good job of supporting Canadian writers. And I think we have to support them in turn.
I will suppress my urge to rant about this because I really believe after reading so much incredible fiction published by I typically read almost exclusively fiction and reading such stellar fiction from independent presses that like why aren't these books on the Governor General's long list and the other prizes? Maybe the stuff being published by the big five is worth reading, but I'm not interested. I want to read what the small presses are bringing out into the world.
The small presses don't have the marketing budgets
Yeah.
that the big five do. And it's all about marketing. And I think that's appalling. I think that's appalling. And the other thing that the big five are doing, when they publish a book, they want to know that they can upload it to another service. They want to know they can sell it to Disney or Netflix. And those are the kinds of books that the big five, not exclusively, but those are the books that are getting a lot of attention. But I agree with you. I think the small presses do a wonderful job. Guernica, Woolsack, and Win, Now or Never. We're so blessed in this country and we need to support these presses.
Absolutely.
The other thing I'd like to say is the importance of also supporting small independent bookstores.
Absolutely, yes. I missed Independent Bookstore Day on April 26th because that was the day my husband finally joined me here in Canada. He's Japanese and immigration issues finally got sorted so he could come here and live with me. And so I missed Independent. I had a good reason for missing Independent Bookstore Day, but yes, I certainly agree with what you just said.
So he's with you now?
Yeah, he's been here since April 26th.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh,
That's
thank you.
wonderful news.
Yeah. What a fascinating conversation, Lucy. Best of luck with the first few weeks of your book, this latest book being out into the world. And thanks for being so generous with your time today.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest, Sean. I really appreciate what you do to support and uplift Canadian writers. So thank you.
Doesn't A Quilting of Stars just sound fabulous? So I got some merch when she sent me the copy. I think Lucy Black made this bookmark, which is quite lovely. And then there is a bookmark or business card sized promo type of bookmark for it. And then a thing about the launch, which has already happened. It was on October 19th in Uxbridge, Ontario. Can't wait to read this one. All right, I had more trouble with my video editing software, which slowed me down with the video I was hoping to post in the last few days. Didn't get it finished, but I will. Getting the kinks ironed out of the software. So I don't have anything else to tell you about in terms of weekly highlights. There haven't been any. So let's move on to the What Did Sean Read portion of the Friday Reads. And I read a lot. I have one bale to tell you about, and I finished 3. And I'm going to be starting, I think, 3. This was a buddy read with Joe, and by the time I finished the last story that we read, which was somewhere in the middle of the book, I just was ready to give up on it. So this is a collection of Nigerian short stories that are interlocking. Jollof Rice and Other Revolutions by Omolola Ijeoma Ogunyemi. And just wasn't resonating. There was a couple stories I was like, oh, pretty good. But other than that, there was various generations of characters in a family. Some stories we couldn't make head nor tail of what the protagonist of that particular story had to do to connect to the characters in the other. But there just wasn't enough that was gelling between the stories and the stories themselves. Too many of them were just bland. So we have bailed. I'll tell you what we're replacing it with in a few minutes. The 3 books that I finished, I loved them all. The first 2 complicatedly. I think they're all going to be 5-star reads, but I'll reserve the one that I didn't have any complicated reaction to. No quibbles with it all for the end. But otherwise in no particular order. In a very confused way, I absolutely adored this Palestinian novel, Gaza Weddings, by Ibrahim Nasrallah, translated from the Arabic by Nancy Roberts. This was for my Patreon book club, and we had a discussion about it last Saturday. And I was not confused particularly, or hardly confused at all, until we had the book discussion. And this doesn't happen for me very often. But several members of the book club had insights or interpretations of the book that just knocked me for a loop. And I was so surprised by what they thought. They persuaded me, but then I thought, I don't think I understood this book at all. And so I wasn't a very good kind of moderator of the discussion after that, because my brain was going, and there was a voice saying, Sean, you're such an idiot. You didn't get anything out of this book. You totally didn't get it, Sean. You just didn't get it. But I think various interpretations are possible. But putting that aside for now, if you like a puzzle, because there was puzzling things about it. There's these twin girls in Gaza, and various things to do with and it's in Israeli bombarded Gaza, which pick a decade, pick a year. It's always been that way, but this is probably from 10 years ago or something. The book was originally published in 2004 in Arabic. And so they're getting bombed by Israel every second day, and people are dying, dropping like flies, especially the men, but not only the men. And so there's all kinds of things about being martyred and just the incredible ubiquity of death amongst these characters, their families, their friends, their community. I would say the 3 main characters are the twins, Randa and Lamis. And ever since they were like a year old, one wanted the other one's name, and the mother actually went to, I forget which of the girls, I think it was Randa wanted to be Lammas. And so the mother went to Lammas and said, would you be willing to trade names? And Lammas said, absolutely not. But then as they grew up, in ways that were both playful and beguilingly confusing, they kept pretending to be one another. Especially Randa kept pretending to be Lammas. The boy next door fell in love with Lammas, but was it Lammas? Or was it Randa being Lammas? And that confounding and absolutely fascinating aspect of this novel, the slipperiness of identity, manifested in many other ways. I'm not going to go on and on about it, but for example, one man was killed and so badly blown up into pieces that nobody knew who he was, but 5 people in the community whose husbands didn't come home that day went to the hospital and then waited at the grave for more DNA testing or whatever to positively identify him, and so many other things about identity. And the things that were fascinating were also distracting in a way until you get into the middle of the novel and you just realize what a horrible situation these people are living in. So then it's all threaded together. There's all this kind of playful, confusing stuff. It's a series of monologues, and when it's a conversation between one of the other female characters, the mother of the boy next door, and her husband, he doesn't answer. And it was, I'm not going to say any more about that, but it was several very smart readers who made an interpretive leap with that that just made my head explode during the book discussion. And I really have to reread this book. It was absolutely powerful. It wouldn't be for every reader. It's certainly the best work of fiction I've read that set in Palestine, in the Palestinian territories. It's part of not a series with linked characters, but it is a series that Nasrallah has written that is gradually being translated into English. It's the third part of his Palestinian tragicomedy. The first one, Time of White Horses, 2016 in English, and The Lanterns of the King of Galilee, 2015. And I definitely want to read those. I won't soon forget this one, and I want to reread it soon because I think I missed a bunch of stuff. And very timely read, obviously. The second one that I finished was this 1935 Anglo-Irish novel, Full House by M.J. Farrell, which was the pseudonym that Molly Keane used for the first half of her writing career. This was about her 5th or 6th novel. I just looked that up minutes before turning the recorder on because I thought it was her debut. And the things that kind of bugged me about it, or that didn't quite work for me, I thought it was a debut. But it's not. Her writing career as M.J. Farrell, her first book was 1926, this was 1935, and it was about 6th or 7th. And then until 1952, there was like maybe 10 books that she wrote under M.J. Farrell and a few plays. And then she kind of come back, and in 1981, under her own name, Molly Keane, she wrote Good Behavior, which I think is available in NYRB, and I think I actually have it on my shelf. And she wrote 2 more after that. I love the writing in this book so much that I kind of want to exclaim that she's one of my new favorite writers. Certainly on the sentence level. I read this to Mum, and I just loved reading it out loud. Whenever I'm doing that, reading to her or to Mary Jean, if the sentence just grabs me, I will read it a second time. And it was, I think I read half the book a second time just because I had to, oh, that was a lovely sentence. Let's hear it one more time. I'm just going to read one paragraph. This is one of the main characters, Eliza. She's the friend of this family. She's been in love with the husband in an unrequited way for decades. She herself is probably in her 50s, widowed decades ago, but she has a pining, unrequited romantic friendship with the dad of the noble Anglo-Irish family, Julian. And she's frenemies with his wife, Olivia. She thinks they're awful parents to their adult kids, Sheena and John, and they have a 6-year-old, Marky, who's one of the most adorable young kids in all of literature. Most realistic and adorable, and then other times you just want to kill him. He's so naughty. But just without any more context than that, she's visiting them, and she goes out for a walk. Eliza was wearing a long silver evening gown and a green tweed coat. She went toiling up the path through the woods as though she were a tree herself walking. Now the evening was more silver than it was grey, And when the birches thinned and scattered, there were rocks among the scabious and the bell heather, where you could sit and see an angle of the house, which was like a dream of a place that you will see and have known before you see it. Not a very pleasant or comfortable dream. This was where Eliza was going. So, that will either resonate for you or not, but I just found much of the prose absolutely gasp-worthy, and the character work in here was to die for. But it was a bit clunky of a plot, and sometimes it bothered me more than others, but ultimately it was such a rich reading experience. I think I loved it, and Mum liked it, but I could see kind of plot holes, or, like I say, the plot creaked along at places. Our most favorite character was the Marky's, the little kid's governess, Miss Parker, who had a beard, and everybody was mocking her. All the people that she was serving were always making jokes about her beard, and she was so self-conscious about it, and I just felt that character was given such tender care by the writer. So there's a long scene, at least one, maybe two, of her putting on, and I could never remember the syllable stress on this word because I'd never hear it said out loud. I had to look it up 3 times and I still can't remember it.
Depilatory.
Depilatory, there it is. Depilatory, which is a cream or lotion for removing unwanted hair. But that word occurred 100 times in the book, and it was just heartbreaking because she was maybe 30 plus, and she had this facial hair that she hated, and she was trying to get rid of it, and you just felt so sorry for her. And then there was a bit of a love interest, and that didn't end up going anywhere in the book, and I wish there'd been more of her, because she was the only one that you could just love in an uncomplicated way. But I was deeply invested in the book. It wasn't entirely satisfying, but I loved the writing, and I can't wait to read more by M.J. Farrell, or maybe more particularly when she started writing under her own name, to see what her style was like by the time she was an older woman, Molly Keane. And I finished this short memoir for Shorty September, a memoir of a... There isn't much about being a lesbian in the memoir, because it was published in the 40s, but about a lesbian land girl in the UK during World War II. Set My Hand Upon the Plough by E.M. Barraud, and reprinted by Little Taller Books, which put out some great stuff if you're into nature writing and whatnot. And I loved this. What a great writer. Her name is Enid Mary Barraud. 1904 to 1972, and before the war she'd been an insurance agent or whatever, and she volunteered to become a land girl, and it was how women could support the war effort, and they would go out into the countryside and do agricultural work to take the place of the young farmhands that were off fighting the war. And she's in Cambridgeshire, and she wrote this memoir about it, and it was just lovely. I shared quite a bit about her working as a volunteer librarian last week, and the farming stuff was interesting too. I didn't understand all the farming, like the old threshing machines and working with the cows and the pigs and stuff, but I just was fascinated by how she described it. I didn't need to understand it, but I just loved the language. I just loved, again, her prose was great. In many ways it read like a novel, like you really got to know the men she was working with, in particular her boss, who was like the head guy, what would they call him, the foreman or whatever at the farm? That's not the word, but his name was Stone, and you really get to know Stone in this memoir. And the other fascinating bit was when the Italian prisoners of war were brought to work on the farm, and she worked alongside them, and they didn't speak English, and nobody spoke Italian, but they did create this kind of language, this pidgin that they could communicate with. And there was so much fascinating stuff about language and communication in here in those parts. Now, if you're looking for lesbian stuff in here, you're not going to find it. Her partner's name is Bunty, and I think she used that name, or my friend, maybe 4 times over the 107 pages. So it's not rich in that way. But I would read anything E.M. Barraud has written, and there isn't much in print, but I'm going to keep my eye open for it. The last thing I'll tell you is in the very last few pages, she talks about a neck of wheat that's hanging on her up beside the fireplace. And so I Googled that to find out what it was, and it is crafted out of, whether it's corn or wheat or whatever, the last bit on the field before the field has been harvested is made into this what's called a neck of wheat. And I guess because it's twisted up in a spiral, so the thinnest part is like the neck. And so neck of wheat. And she wants to learn and has trouble learning how to make it. And then she links it up to ancient harvest rites. But she doesn't say that in other parts of England, she's in Cambridgeshire, there was a whole rich tradition and almost like a festival to do with this that was called Crying the Neck. And there was a song and a dance and a procession. And I just found all this absolutely fascinating. Maybe she didn't know about it because it was all like Cornwall and Devon. And I don't know where that is compared to Cambridgeshire, but apparently it's far apart. But where she was living, it was just a decorative thing. But in those parts of the UK, there was a whole ancient ritual, the crying of the neck. You Google it, you'll find really interesting stuff about it. This memoir wouldn't be for everybody. It's pretty specialized. I absolutely adored it. So that's what I finished. I'm going to be starting 3. The next book I'm reading to Mum is one that Gina Stanier not only recommended to me, but back when I was still doing the Bite-Sized Book Chat series, she made an appearance on that series to recommend this book. And it's actually a middle grade novel, perhaps, I'm not sure. But it seems like it's for children, but adults would love it. And Mum previewed it and said, oh yeah, that sounds like me. It's called A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus, set in England back in World War II era, published in 2021. And the author is American. But apparently it's just an amazing novel about 3 kids who are being raised by their grandmother, and they weren't very sad when she died. Their parents were already dead. They didn't really get on with the grandmother. Then she died, and then who was going to take care of them? And they end up going out with the mass wartime evacuation of children from London, and plot ensues, and if the cover's anything to go by, it's going to be an absolute delight. To replace the collection of short stories that Joe and I were buddy reading, we're going to go to the next short novel by Amit Chaudhuri, the Indian writer. This one is called Afternoon Raag. Don't have a clue what it's about, don't care. It was published in 1993. The one we read earlier this year was A Strange and Sublime Address, and it was truly sublime. Absolutely loved it. So, because of the bail, we're going to get on to the second one right now. And finally, I'm doing a pseudo-buddy read with the wonderful Roz of Scallydaddling About the Books and her daughter, the wonderful Tilly of Tilly's Shelf. Last year, or maybe 2 years ago, we read a novel by Abdulrazak Gurnah, Afterlives, I believe it was called. Yes, it was, Afterlives, which we quite enjoyed. And now we're reading the next one that's come out, Theft. And I got this copy from Blackwell's, and it's signed. How lovely. I didn't know that when I bought it. You can see the signature there. And so I don't know what it's about. Something to do with theft, perhaps. But we're going to have a Zoom chat somewhere towards the end of November, and we'll be talking about it then. Whew! Up to my earlobes in books. How wonderful. Thanks for watching.